Hello, man. Hello, Mgtow. Hello, man. Hello, Mgtow. Okay. Today we're going to talk a little bit about homelessness. We're going to do it in a different way. We're going to take a look at the views from John Rawls. We're going to take a look at, we're going to get into a little absurdity at the end of it. And we're going to take a look at Bertrand Russell's ideas. And it's going to, it'll be interesting, I guess. There's two kinds of people in this world, I say. Two kinds of people. I noticed this one day when I was driving through Detroit, and we went under a bridge, and I was with a friend of mine. We looked up under the bridge, and there was homeless people, and there were blankets, and there were mattresses, and there were suitcases, and there was homeless men under the bridge. And I went like this. I went, oh, I don't want to see that no more. I don't want to see that no more, I said. My buddy says, oh, I don't want to see that either. And he immediately got on his phone. I said, stop the car. He thought I was on board with him. I said, stop the car. And I reached in my pocket, and one of the men came down, and I gave him $5. And I'm sorry you have to live like that. I'm sorry. This should never happen in society. My buddy was on the phone. He was calling the local department of fire and safety and reporting the homeless camp underneath the bridge. There's two kinds of people. He didn't want to see it, and I didn't want to see it. They're both the same terms, but there's differences, and I became a difference machine at that day. Bertrand Russell talks about, I can't pronounce his name. Bertrand Russell talks about the difference machine when he gives in his famous 27-chapter course of philosophy and the mind of the philosopher. And what do we think? How do we do these things? How do we put these things together in our minds? And then we'll start off with I always start off with, I start off with Rawls' theory of justice. The difference principle says wealth in society is okay as long as the worst of us are in reasonably good shape. And then when I look at male homelessness, the worst of us are not in reasonably good shape. Russell gives a few... He goes into it, and he tries to see. You got to know something about Rawls. Rawls never wanted to take credit for any of his work. Rawls often dumped the problem of explaining what he said on other people, his students in Harvard, his normals, the people that he was around, and the people that he talked to. He was never one to meet outside of those instances, and so he laid these terms on other people to explain. Bertrand Russell is one of those people, I suppose, or incidentally one of those people. How can we look at homelessness and then do a difference machine in our head? Do you know what a difference machine is? A difference machine measures the polynomial differences between two things, and it's an easy idea. It comes from way back in the 1800s or 1700s. He explains the difference machine. It just measures the difference between two things, and that was the first computer, I suppose. It's an interesting algebraic compilation. We have mononormals, we have polynormals, we have trinormals, but polynormals are what we're speaking about here. how can we look at the worst of our society and reasonably think that homelessness in that sense is equal to? And then we start looking at the theory of justice, and we start looking at what Rawls was talking about in the theory of justice. The good example I give about knowing the difference between these two things. How can you look at a homeless man and say there is no difference between how a rich person lives and a homeless man? You could do it in your family. We could measure these things in a family group, underneath a house, underneath a roof. We have disadvantaged people and we have advantaged people. The father in that situation would play the role of an advantaged person. The children we talked about yesterday would play the role of the disadvantaged people, the father's job and the mother's job. And the mother's job is sort of this in-between job where she's disadvantaged to a portion, but she's advantaged to at least equality. And that's what the position that Rawls was talking about. But there are the disadvantaged people of children. Now we look in our society, however the homeless got to homeless, 30% of them are represented by veterans. And I do believe there's a different theory behind what they say there is. We're taking 18, 17-year-old kids and we're putting them into a military situation where all their needs are met. And then after that, we throw them through a psychological process of Thompson's theory about how to create a great soldier. And then we take care of him, we meet all his needs, and then we screw up his brain on a battlefield, and then we dump him off in society where all his needs are not met. Hence, 30% of the homeless population are veterans. It's an easy theory. I'm a difference machine. I'm the difference machine in this world. I think about these things. What was the difference between a normal college student and a soldier? Why does the normal college student end up this way? And the difference between the soldier, and why does he end up homeless? It's easy for me to see that he was disadvantaged by the military experience. I've similarly had that experience when I walked off a Greyhound station in Cleveland and realized with $360 in my pocket in the early 80s or late that man, I would have to do something real quick or else I was going to be homeless. That time I ran through 22 jobs and you know, I didn't like some work and I didn't like the people I worked at and that. So I ran through a shitload of jobs at that time. And, but I was advantaged in the way that I could do that. I had a scheme and had a plan and had a pretty good father that taught me about being an advantaged person. And I didn't fall for the trap of letting all that garbage get from within my head. So I came out within a pretty reasonable, you know, utilitarianism and all that stuff set aside. And I don't really like the idea of utilitarianism to the theory of justice. And that's the way it always plays out. And we'll explain that later in the video. I'll try to keep this brief and short. But I knew there was a measurement in my head between me being homeless and me being at least inclined to have an apartment, a shelter, and food, warmth, and a blanket over me, and the ability to travel to get to work. That was the least in our society that should have been afforded to me. Let me say that's the least thing in society that should have been afforded to me. Those children in a children's situation of a home inside of a traditional home, the least that should be afforded to them is shelter, food, warmth, if it's a winter area, the ability to travel back and forth to a schooling so they can learn these things. That's the least. When Rawls talks about these things, he talks about the original position, and he starts off with the original position in this thing. He talks about a social contract. We talked about a social contract these last few days and how we should think about these things as Mgtows, how we should think about these things when we look at the homeless as Mgtows is important, and how we present these things to justices, how we present these things to people around us, judges and lawyers and people that are well off, is important how we do this. The original position is the veil of ignorance. And you take all these people and you say all the people in the world come from a position of equality, and we're all blind, we're all the same color, or we're all these metaphysical beings that just exist on this planet, and there is no other thing. What would you do for the least among you? Well, the original position answers itself, because we are all equal, because we are all in the same position. What you would do for the least among you, you would do for yourself. What you would do for the least among you, you would do for yourself. And that's not a biblical term. If you have to, that's a very sociological term that came from philosophers, not from the Bible. We go under two principles after that. There's the first principle where it talks about a lot about liberty, and we won't go into it. It's just liberty. Each person has equal rights under the extensive total of the system and equal basic liberties. That's what I was talking about with the children and the disadvantage. We talked about that in the sense of incels the other day. Do the incels have these total liberties within the system, and why are they being excluded or from the system? Why does the media seem to throw their chart in the obstacle of life and judge them to be ostracized from our system and from everything that we can partake in? That's not fair. And I know some people would say there's no really concept of fairness, and that's the utilitarian. And I don't do the utilitarian arguments because I go back, I digress to my friend in the car that was on the phone instead of trying to help. He didn't want to see it because he didn't want to see it in his eyes. It was too hard for him to take. He didn't want to see it because he was disgusted with it. He was a utilitarian person. I'm not a utilitarian. I observe the world which I live in, and I try to observe it in the realistic ways that it is. So we have the first principle, and it's just about liberty and our basic liberties. If you want to read your basic liberties, go to the Statue of Liberty and read it. The greatest equal liberty principle, the difference principle, is the last principle, and I have it. It comes down to the least advantaged members of our society and what we would do for them. And there's the equality principle and the greatest equal liberty principle, and these people will go way far with this. But Brantham was just, Russell would just, hey, if you took a homeless person, the thing I like to explain about this thing is look at the way when our president came into the office, the White House, and he looked at the White House, and he wanted to live in Trump Towers, which is very nice in the city of New York. He looked at the White House and he went, man, I don't want to live in this place. This is a dump. Now, can any one of you guys actually move into the White House and say this place is a dump? Well, there's a difference to be measured at that point in people. And that's what Russell was saying about our measurements, and our measurements are all screwed up, and our measurements of humanity under this utilitarian system that we have are all screwed up, and it becomes absurd. And then we start thinking about the absurd, and we start thinking about Camus or Camus or Samas, if you want to pronounce it in original Albanian. Is there a difference between Donald Trump and you? In the way you were raised and what you see? And then I explain the difference. I digress back to the soldier's difference. When the soldier came out, and they represent 30% of the homeless here, the soldier, when he came out, he went into a system that took care of every one of his needs. And he was put into another system where he was asked to be very violent. and very decisive. And then he comes back to a society that tells him you can't be decisive and you can't, and we start seeing this in the male reflection. The male reflection, the dimorphic male. We're told that we can't enact our dimorphism, our size, our strength, and our intelligence, and win in this society. Somehow the male lives in a different, with a different set of rules. The bar for us is I have to restrain myself, which I explained a few videos ago. So I have to restrain myself and think about everybody else's well-being. What is the good in society? And I have to think about these things and not be too selfish. We talked about selfishness and what is selfishness yesterday in one of my videos. So we can see how this thing of Rawls's general society is working up. Now we will have the utilitarian argument of what if I choose to gamble? What if I choose to, do I have the right to, but the original theory always goes back to the same thing. We are all born blind. We are all born without these things. We are all born in these positions. We're all equal in that sense. No matter how utilitarian plays out and whatever theory you want to play into it, it all goes back to the same theory, the original theory, Rawls's original theory. And we have to start thinking about these things. We can measure these things. That's why Russell gave us this measurement. He said, look at this guy. It's somewhere in there was Charles Gabbage. He made this machine, and this simple machine that was a mechanical machine. It was chick, 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 and you pull the lever and you push the lever back in, and you put an algebraic compilation, and on this side an algebraic compilation on this side, and it measured the difference between the two compilations. And somebody in dear, I can't remember the date, my history is off today, but someone did that in their mind. Now each and every one of you people as Mgtows have 1,000 times the capacity to do the measurements of a difference machine in your mind when you look at simple things like homelessness, housing, and the rich. What is the difference between these things, and what should we do if our basic theory of justice in America is going to be rich is okay? And I'll go with, you can become rich in this society as long as one thing happens. As long as the poorest and the weakest and the worst off among us are in reasonably good shape. And that's a reasonable statement. It's a reasonable statement. But when I look out over the social systems that are developing today, I look out at people that are like the guy that was sitting next to me in a car, which is no longer my friend, because I can't have people around me that think like that are so affixed to removing things that bother them from their lives through any means possible, not through any altruistic means, not through any kindness, or they display casual cruelty everywhere they go just so they can put up a wall so they don't have to see the horrors of the world. I don't make friends like that, and that's one of the things that I look at when I do anything in this life. If that kind of person is sitting next to me, I know, and you know as a Mgtow, that's the kind of simp that would throw you under the bus for a woman. He's the kind of simp that would battle you in a situation. If you were in the bar and you were, a woman was kind of schmooze enough, she'd get all up in your chest there. You know that happens. She'd get all up in your chest, and she's like, ooh, look at this manly chest. And she's like, yeah. And he wanted that. There would be an altercation. There would be an event. And these are the kinds we talk about in Mgtow. And that's how I measure these men. This is how I stay out. And I keep myself safe in these positions, because when I start measuring people, I do a lot of measurements in my head in a split second anymore. We talk about the male, and we talk about that veil inside of our head, which is this thing that we do. And we have this little area on the side of your brain. I can't see if I'm doing it right. On the side of your brain as a male that slows things down. It stops and it thinks about things for a millisecond. In millisecond, you can see this portray, you can see this work out when a male and a female walk into a club or a wedding hall or something. The female goes straight in and she's zigzagging around looking for where she wants to sit. The male stops and he observes the whole room. And he says, I had history with that guy. I have history with them people. I don't like those people. Oh, yeah, there's Bob and Jim and Harry over there. And then they like what I drink, and we do that. And I move towards those, and you'll see the argument. We're going to sit over here with Sharon and Shelley. And she never did the thought in her head about what's going to happen if I have history with those people. Men do these things. Men are automatic difference machines. We're rational. It's what makes us rational as Mgtows. And I think sometimes Mgtows are over rational. I do these measurements, and I do these calculations in my head on a moment's notice now, and I notice the difference between the homeless. It's an easy thing. And even the guy, and I don't want to talk down about the rich. I don't even want to get into that argument. Of course, everybody wants to be rich in this society when society rewards it so greatly. I mean, really, it doesn't. It's a non-argument for me. But I can measure the difference between homeless men and 30% of those homeless soldiers in the house that I live in. There's a calculable difference in that. And as a human being, I would expect every Mgtow to be able to measure that difference. But even in here, I have to practice these things where I have to look at guys and I have to measure their souls and things that they say, and things that they do, and their attitudes that they take, whether they have a utilitarian attitude or the way that they have an objective attitude and they're willing to learn, whether they're slightly liberal on both sides. We have libertarians on this side and we have liberals on this, and it both means the same thing. It means I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to take in other information and apply that to the situations which may confront me at that time. So we're not very much difference in the two parties. We're just, there's just this weirdness split that I don't really understand, because I'm very much a centrist. But I think the centrist people are the measurement of people that can see the difference. So in Mgtow, when we look at homeless people and we look at homeless men, we often say like, oh man, we got to do something, but I don't see a lot being done around here. As a matter of fact, the last time I seen something being done, a very utilitarian person came in and said he was going to do things for us and took $20,000-$30,000 of Mgtow money and never did what he was supposed to do. And we had those incidences, and now everybody's shell-shocked from it. We have 2 or 3 of those incidences, and everybody's shell-shocked from it. They no longer donate to the massive resource of Mgtow, and some way down the road we'll have to fix this under great hesitance from the other side that don't think Mgtow is a group, and that's weird, and I'll have to go into that someday in some real deep philosophical terms so they understand that we are. Jesus. These are the same people that would say that are the nihilists, that say everything in life's subjective, and this doesn't exist, and this doesn't exist, and this doesn't exist. And I say, you know what? Go back to your fucking playpen and and read a book, because yes, I exist. I think, therefore I am. That was Kierkegaard, not Kierkegaard. That was I can't pronounce his name. You know, I can't. Descartes, his idea of how to immediately put that subjectivism behind you. And I thank God every day for coffee. But I can do a difference engine in that too. There's 200,000 plus American males, 1/3 of them veterans that are waking up this morning and they don't have a cup of coffee. They don't have a Keurig machine that I press a button in the morning and it makes me a fresh brewed cup of beautiful coffee. I can do the difference in that. And that's what I expect when I see out of Mgtow's. Can we do the difference? Can we apply this theory of justice in Mgtow and be better people? And that's all I wanted to talk about today is Rawls' theory of justice. And when we look at the homeless, how do we apply these things? And if you want to do a course, there's Bertrand Russell's 27 chapter course about the mind. You can take it anytime you want to do it, but it's a little bit of difficult thinking, and he'll put you through it. He's going to put you through it. You can take a utilitarian attitude while you do it, but I think by the time you're done, if you apply all the principles, you'll be a little more, you'll be a better person for it, and you'll be able to measure the differences of these things. And that's all I wanted to talk about today a little bit before we're going for tacos. I got Dougie all tucked in. We took him to the vet yesterday. It was a horrible scene. Dougie's a cantankerous, and you can buy it in book form now. It's Benjamin. It's just you can buy it on Amazon. You can listen to it. You can buy the study guides as you go on Amazon, and it's I'll put it in the low bar. I did this course recently, and it's a non-credited course, or you can get it if you look online. You can get it accredited if you're interested in that stuff. It's called The Mind, and it's 27 chapters, and he goes through a lot of stuff about how thinking. It'll talk about the difference machines. It'll talk about but you have to put that stuff together in your mind and really realize what Rawls was talking about and what Russell was talking about, and then we get to this idea at the end of this of the absurd, and that's where I'm at in life right now. I look at the absurd and why people in our House, in our Senate, and our president, in these offices that these people hold cannot see the simple difference between the homeless and the poor and a regular person. And it just blows my mind. And I know they're just disadvantaged people. And if we all start thinking about it like that, instead of I hear some Mgtow say the most crazy things, and then they'll claim to be an advocate for male homelessness at the same time, which is cognitive dissonance in the maximum amount. Man, that's just cognitive dissonance, and it just blows my mind sometimes when I hear the stupid things that come out of people's mouths. But I think in Mgtow, for the most part, most people are pretty smart, and they don't question the ideas and the syllogisms in their head. They just kind of go with them, and most of the time we see the difference, and we yell and we scream daily about these things. We yell and we scream about how those men got there. Now we know they got there, how they got there. They're soldiers. They were never programmed properly to live in this society. I know I had to do it myself at a certain point. It was huge, but it taught me about working on huge things. When I walked out and there was nobody giving me dinners, there was no bed there. I walked out into a Greyhound station in the middle of Cleveland with a stupid look on my face. Like, wow, what do I do now with $360 in my pocket? What do I do now? And that's what they'll meet when they get out in this society. There will be no one ushering them or giving them ways and means to just move right into college. Now we can see a difference in that too between Health and Human Services. What the programs are there and what they're given for men and soldiers that move into those positions in society, and should they be automatically given some kind of education right off the bat, would take care of their food and their housing and kind of work them back into society. But no, our government doesn't see these differences. I mean, there's a lot of questions that I can go on for hours about the questions that arise from this simple thought. Is there differences in our principles? Is there differences in measurements that I can obviously see between a homeless man and myself? And the obvious answer is yes. Yes, and that's a calculable difference. It's a calculable difference. And if you're one of these people that would deny that in life, man, I think evolution passed you by. at least mental evolution. But we do have those kind of people in this world. I think most of them would run off and get married and try that thing. And most of them will be punished greatly until their theory of how justice works out in their head. But I do think a large portion will end up being senators and congressmen, and some of them will even be a president. And that's where the shame comes in, when we can look at our highest of office and just realize that they have no clue about the difference in justice. And it's sad, and it's pathetic, and the whole world laughs at us. And think about that statement, President Trump walking in the White House and calling the White House a dump. A dump. Really? Hillary Clinton did that too in some respect. She often walked around and called things, this is a dump, this is a bombed out shelter, she said in one instance. But it tells us the difference in these people. I would never vote for either one of those people if they can't see the difference between a homeless man and himself, if they can't calculate the difference and say, I am in the position. You know how much money it would take? You know how much money it would take to end homelessness in America? Yeah, I've told you this before. You can go look it up. How much money would it take? And Google will tell you the answer. It's $50 million, the same price as the wall. $50 billion, the same price as the wall. And then we have no homelessness in America. I'd rather invest in that one and invest in getting these people back on their feet so these people can pay taxes the same as I do. And that's where the advantage is. That's where you can start doing the difference machine. You start saying, okay, if I can get every person working, then that takes in so much more taxes, and then the government can spend it on another war. And that's the absurd. But with that, I don't want to get too deep. I'm going to Taco Tuesday. And I'm going to go get myself a taco because I think I deserve it. Dougie's okay. He's on some medication. He may not last 2 weeks more, the doctor says. He's in bad shape. He's got sores on him that just won't stop. He's got staphylococcus that won't heal. And we're trying, and it's a lot of work. But Dougie, I think there's a little strength deep down in that little noxious little dog that just wants to bite the world in the ass the same way as I do. And I think you'll make it, but we'll see. And that's my life right now, guys. And that's the way I think. I hope you all learned something today, or simply just was entertained a little bit by my presence. And most of all, guys, I thank each and every one of you guys for coming around and having the courage to be hated, the courage to be a Mgtow. Being a Mgtow is the courage to be hated among society. And the only reason they hate you is because you're better. Everybody hates somebody that's better. I think we have the capacity to keep learning and doing these syllogisms in our head and keep pushing our special form of social justice on the world. Because my form of social justice is the theory of justice that just so happens to be right. Says many, many philosophers, and the original position of many, many philosophers would tell, yes, Joe, you're right. And it's better being right and hated than wrong and an idiot. And that's 90% of our society nowadays. And I don't think anybody in this group is wrong and an idiot. I think most of Mgtows are pretty up on their philosophies. So, like always, thanks for coming around, man. And most of all, thanks for being a Mgtow. Mgtow.